Readicide. There are many things that I've learned that I want to apply or change. The first thing I would love to apply is have all of our secondary teachers and administrators and so forth, and even elementary, read this book. I have been, as it's June and I've been reading this text and working with colleagues during summer school, I have been talking a lot about this book, and some have read it and some haven't, but those that have read it agree that everybody needs their hands on this book, and they just really need to realize what's going on and things that we need to change, and have those hard conversation, kind of the hard talk like Kelly talks about on page 25. So that's the first thing I would like to do, is make sure everyone reads this, if I can truly apply something like that within my school district. Something that I talked about a little bit earlier in the connections part was how I used to do some current events. We would read the newspaper, there's articles, magazines, but I don't do enough of that, and that's something that I want to incorporate or bring light to my teachers who I work with, since I am a traveling Hal teacher, to utilize that and use those things in their classroom. Or if I am working with a small group of students, there's I can do a lot of connections with magazine text as opposed to just a literature novel that they might read in connection to the Pearl or something like that within their classrooms. So I just love how that just brings authentic reading in, it's real life, and they're learning more, which he kept reiterating in the text about, we need to be learning these real world things instead of just things that are within text, so we need to make those connections. Another thing that I would love to apply is having those hard conversations, those difficult interactions that need to be had, and that started on page 25. And this kind of led to the connection of, we need to have these conversations, but it turned into, a little bit later on page 51, it talked about literature circles and being a discussion director, and how students can have different jobs and so forth. And the reason why I think this does relate to a hard conversation, a lot of schools I don't want to say a lot of schools, but I feel like some of the reading specialists that I've worked with don't always believe in literature circles. Well, I think Kelly Gallagher is saying so much about how powerful they are. But with literature circles, I will tell you, when I was teaching 4th and 6th grade, our reading specialist told us that lit circles are absolutely not allowed. We need to do guided reading. And I always thought with my higher kids that is something perfect for them, to really dive into the reading, do things a little bit on their own, not be so instructed by me, but really so I can just have in-depth conversations with them while they're reading and really get into the text. So in the text, he mentioned that teachers don't really do this because they're pressured by, they're buried by the pressures of teaching, and there's so many other things that are going on. But we need to be doing this, more real-world teaching. I also loved that he gave some suggestions on how teachers can build classroom libraries. I know at the elementary level, I would get, my students through Scholastic would get book orders, and we would always get free books for our classroom by how many people ordered and how many points I had, and things like that. But I never really thought about going to Amazon like he suggested. I know that local libraries have very cheap and sometimes free books for sale. They're kind of doing those rummage sales, but some other things, garage sales, other teachers getting rid of books, there are ways to definitely build classroom libraries, and that is something I used to have at the elementary level, but when I moved on to the middle school, I lost a lot of those things. So that's definitely something that I want to bring back, so that my students know that they can even, take books from me, even though I'm not a regular classroom teacher. Let's see, on some of the other things that I want to apply. Okay, so So far, I would love to have everybody read the text. I want to do more authentic reading and kind of bring that back with more real-world application. I want to have hard conversations and difficult interactions. I want to bring back literature circles and make a bigger classroom library at the middle school level. But to apply, get more students to read academic texts and do it in a way that helps them and doesn't deter them from hating reading. I love some of the things that he suggested, and I'm going to highlight just a couple of those. But they talked about the guided tour. Start with the guided tour and end with a budget tour. And it's kind of where the teacher starts a little bit, but then you let go. You loosen the reins, and maybe for the first part of the book you help, but then you let your students do the remainder of the book on their own. And on page 79, right in that section, it says, teachers should not hold the hands of their students all the way through the novel. And I think that's powerful, and I think that's going to help them. And a little bit that connects to like the big chunk, little chunk, because it talks about the reading flow and building stamina, and I think, I feel like those two are somewhat relatable. On page 81, Kelly Gallagher talks about topic floods, and I think that's such a cool thing to do. He talked about using different color highlighters, and you can look at both sides. You have maybe a side that you agree with and an opposing side, and just it also brings in critical thinking and conversations. So I love that idea of topic floods, and I think that's something you can definitely incorporate into reading, especially in a content area like social studies or science, when you can have that. I love too that he kind of broke down Hamlet, and he really talked, he let students, he does some front loading with it, and he talks about real life things that go with Hamlet and how students can connect to it, because just reading Hamlet, students are not going to understand it. So I love how he talked about breaking that down, and so connecting pop culture to things that are, not within our times, but it just shows that a lot of the same things were going on as they are now. So I love that idea, and that is something I want to apply. And then kind of the last thing that was noted is reading difficult text. I think as teachers we're afraid because it's too hard for our students, but just like Hamlet, and then he even mentioned too, all students should read Hamlet. That's not easy, but if you do things the appropriate way and the right way that helps students, you are helping to prevent Readicide within our schools. So there's a lot in this text, ways to prevent Readicide, and he shares a lot of those things, but those are just a few of the things that I want to apply from this text.